Hello everyone, Indro here. In this video I'll walk you through the creation of yet another artwork for Benny's monthly Photoshop battle. Now at this point I'm pretty sure I don't have to introduce Benny from Benny Productions to you, but if you don't know him in any case, be sure to check out his channel, he's super awesome. About the artwork, we have to use this image of him and create something along the lines of a medieval theme. So the very first thing that came into my mind was the beautiful expansive visuals of Lord of the Rings. I thought about turning Benny's photo into a giant fabled statue in between the waterfalls, and maybe a knight is coming in search of that legendary figure. For this composition, I tried to delve into the realms of matte painting and create a compelling narrative with an expansive environment. So I quickly made this grey tone to sketch. I tried to keep Benny's statue at the center and the explorer at the bottom left node of the 3x3 grid. I also tried to frame the composition by adding trees to guide the eyes to the focus in the center. Now this composition took about 23 hours over a week for me to complete, and it will be very difficult to show everything in detail in this 15 minutes video, so I'll be quickly skipping over the usual stuff like placing raw images, warping, masking and color matching, but I will slow down in the crucial areas like turning Benny into a statue, and will try to explain in detail about those areas. I hope it will be helpful for you, so let's not waste any more of your time and get started. So the first thing I started with is the hardest one, adding the armor to Benny's photo. I took different images of a knight in armor at different angles and then sliced out parts of it and tried to match the body posture. I used a lot of warp, both from Puppet Warp tool and also using the free Transforms warp tool. It's just a matter of trial and error and eyeballing things until they look right. I also tried to pay attention to the folds in the armor and the plating and its forms, and wanted to get them as correct as possible. Once I'm happy with it, I went with the environment creation. I took several images of a mountain cliff and tried to mask and merge them here and there until it matched the vision I had in my mind. At the same time, I used hue saturation to correct any difference in color tones. Then I placed a giant tree on the left, which will help us in framing the composition. The tree looked kind of bland, so I used another tree image to add as a texture on top of it. I used the Puppet Warp tool wherever needed to shape the tree. Then I placed the traveler on the bottom left node point of our 3x3 grid. After that, I added a mountain cliff and another tree on the right side to complete our frame, and this should help guide our eyes to the center where the main focus is. I quickly created a rough draft of the background landscape, but I'll be soon changing that. I found this beautiful image of this massive waterfall, and it is a perfect fit for our artwork. It would help add that expansive feeling we're trying to go for. I duplicated the waterfall a couple of times and masked it here and there to create that perfect scene according to the vision in my mind. I also swapped the top sky with these misty mountains. This should help create a feeling that the land on top is going away very far in the distance. This should also help to add that expansive feeling we are going for. I also spiced up the right foreground cliff with some streams of water. Then it's the main part, and that is to turn Benny into an ancient statue. For that, I quickly desaturated him and added highlights and shadows from image adjustments a couple of times. Every time the shadow values were cranked up all the way to 100%, and that would help reduce the blacks and create a flat base for the statue. Then I took a soft round mixer brush. I clicked the button to clean brush after each stroke, and also kept the wet, load, mix and flow values as you can see here. With that, I smudged up the eyes and the eyebrows to create a look of the classical Roman or Greek statues that we see. I kept painting with the mixer brush to take away details from his face, and also quickly smudged out the hair a bit. I also added some noise reduction with the camera raw filter to smoothen things out a bit. I removed the eyebrows but tried to create the feeling of an elevated area over there, again the same way we see in various classical Roman or Greek sculptures and statues. Next, the armor looked pretty shiny for a stone statue, so I used the same mixer brush, but this time I checked the load brush after each stroke button, took a light grey color and tried to smudge out those very bright areas. Once done, I added this limestone texture. Here will be a lot of trial and error, so things can be a bit confusing for you, but I will try to explain as clearly as I can. I started with adding the texture with the blending mode as multiply and corrected some brightness and contrast and hue saturation on top of it. Then I took this image of the cave and this will be used to create the broken away parts. I kept one copy of the image with a blending mode of multiply to add as an additional texture over our statue, but I added another copy with a normal blending mode only in the broken away areas. I used simple masking while using a grungy brush to give an organic feeling. It's again just trial and error to see what part of the texture matches our statue's broken away areas and give a seamless feeling. I did the same to create a broken off part on the right hand. I needed not to be perfect over here. There can be imperfections and it would only add up to the natural and organic feel of the withered statue. After that, I quickly added a cast shadow of the statue on the mountain behind it just to see where this is all going. Once done, I painted some form shadow of our statue that should fall because of the sunlight coming from the top left direction. I created some fine details on the face by applying precise form shadows. I used an exposure layer with some dark values to create the shadows. I filled the layer mask with black and painted on top of it with white to show areas where I want the shadows to be. Once happy, I intensified the effect by creating another exposure layer and painting some shadows with it. Next, I decided to correct the texture. Now, placing the texture just like that with the blending mode of multiply won't look that realistic because it would not align correctly with the form and structure of the statue. So I kept a copy of the limestone texture that I used and used the clone stamp tool to pick up specific parts of it and add them accordingly to the form and plates in the statue. I matched the direction of the stone texture with the plates and folds in the armor. I occasionally rotated the texture to match the direction as said earlier. Once happy, I again precisely painted the cast shadow of the arms and the sword that would be falling on the statue itself. These details should make it look a lot realistic and bring it to life. The direction of the light is always kept to be from the top left. Then it's time to work on the hair. I took this statue image because it had a similar kind of hair as Benny. I quickly color corrected it and extracted out the hair part and tried to match it with our subject. Next, I added some moss to give it an ancient feel. I took this moss texture and I kept it as a copy and used the clone stamp tool to sample areas and place it precisely on the statue parts where I needed to be. Ideally, the moss should be at the bottom areas of the arms or any folds where the sunlight do not reach that often. Then I worked a bit on the large waterfall. The top was looking a bit too flat and boring, so I took this image of another waterfall and tried to blend it in. But this one had no trees, so I sampled some trees from our main waterfall image and clone stamped them onto the rocky areas of the new one. Now we have to blend the water area. It is too brown and dark. Here also I used the clone stamp tool and the grungy brush to sample some green foliage from the surroundings and add them in between the water. Next, it's time to make some water flow over our statue. For that, I took samples of the same waterfall image and played with the blend if section to get rid of the dark areas. And the lighter water parts automatically started showing over. I strategically took those areas of the waterfall that matches the shape and form of our statue. If needed, I used the free transform warp tool to morph the waterfall and match it according to the structure of our statue. I quickly corrected the cast shadow of the statue on the landscape behind it. I also added some variation by adding little streams of waterfall here and there. Then I worked a bit on the foreground, darkened it a lot so that the focus stays on our statue and the midground. I used exposure layers to darken up these areas. But at the same time, I also added some patches of sunlight to create some variation and some highlights on the ranger. Then I added some fog with a greenish grey color and a soft cloud brush. This fog would greatly help in separating out the foreground from the midground and also add that mystical element. Once I'm happy, I added some castles at the distance. After all, it's a medieval theme, so there got to be some castles. I desaturated the castles and added the same bluish grey color casting as the distant mountains. This would help us add the atmospheric perspective to the castles. If you want to learn in depth about how to add atmospheric perspective and depth into scenes, I have a dedicated video for it. Be sure to check it out. The link should be in the description section. I'm sure you're going to like it. Then I added some overall color grading with a couple of color lookup table adjustment layers. I used fall colors, 3-strip, and red, blue, yellow color lookup tables. The fall color is kept with a color blending mode. For 3-strip, I masked out to show around the top left region from where the sunlight will come. For the red, blue, yellow color lookup table, I only masked it to show around the top distant mountain areas. Then I added some overall curves, some overall contrasts, and some vibrance boost. Next, I added some much required sun rays. For that, on a layer with the blending mode as screen, I painted with some soft yellow color to create the sun rays. Then it's time to add some birds, and adding birds always gives a sense of scale to the composition and at the same time adds life and variation to the scene. So I took this image and inverted it to make the birds look white. I took the areas I need and transformed and skewed the angle to match the perspective. I took another image of the birds, gave them the same treatment, and used them to add some birds near the statue. Finally, I added some glow and bloom on the statue. For that, on a layer with the blending mode as color dodge, I painted with a soft yellow-gray color using a soft round brush to create the shine from the sunlight. Then I felt the skies too boring, so I swapped it with another image having some dramatic clouds. But it was a bit darker, so I had to adjust the mountains as well as the castles to the color tone of the sky. Once again, if you want to learn in details about how to add atmospheric depth like this using color values, be sure to check out my detailed video on that topic. Finally, I added some sharpening and grain using the camera raw filter. So here goes the final result. Let me know your thoughts about the artwork in the comments below. And if you like it, please don't forget to like the video and share it with your friends. Also, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. That would really mean a lot to me and help me create more videos like this. Well then, I'll see you in my next video, and till then, enjoy creating.